Ladies and gentlemen, hold on to your hats and buckle up for a wild ride because we've got a guest on the show today who's been navigating the IT world for a whopping 40 years. Let me introduce to you the one and only Bob Gentzler, a man who, his resume reads like a roller coaster of success and adventure. Now, Bob isn't your run-of-the-mill IT guru. Oh, no. He's also an apprentice to none other than Jesus himself. Yep, you heard it. That's right. When he's not cracking the code of complex computer systems, he's delving into the mysteries of life with the ultimate mentor. But wait, there's more. Bob's not just a tech whiz. He's a family man too, with 3 kids and 6 grandchildren. That's amazing. He's practically running his own IT dynasty at home. And let's not forget his 25-year stint at IBM, where he climbed the corporate ladder not once, but twice, landing himself on top of not just one, but 2 successful IT organizations. But that's not all. Bob's also a man of the cloth, serving his men's ministry for years, spreading the good word while snapping some killer pics on his camera. And if that wasn't enough, he's the go-to guy for 50 IT big shots each quarter, facilitating discussion and dropping knowledge bombs left and right and center. So strap it on, folks, because we're about to take a deep dive into the mind of Bob Gentzler, where IT expertise meets spiritual enlightenment and management gets a run for its money against true leadership. Welcome to the show, Bob. And Bob, thank you for joining me today. Wow, what an exciting career. Can you kind of, delve into a little bit of an intro for us on that?
Wow. Yeah. So, yeah, you could tell I don't write my own material. That was great. That's I'd like to meet that guy. Yeah, that was fun, Nick. Thank you. And it's a joy to be here. Thank you. It's fun to be here. Yeah. So yeah, I really have been blessed. It's like most journeys. It can be messy at times, but kind of made it through 40 years in this industry. There's always something new. Learned to learn, and that's so you better be ready, and you better enjoy that part of it. So yeah, it's been a great journey, and
Bob, like, how did you start that journey? Like, did you know that you wanted to work for IBM your whole life? Like,
that's great.
Kind of like how did that start?
It's really funny. It's a great question. So I grew up out in central Nebraska, the last of 5 kids to in a family of tradesmen. And the first one to go to college.
Wow.
Went to college, went on to grad school, to Georgia Tech, to grad school.
Wow.
My family didn't know what to do with me, and but you learn to work hard, right? You worked hard, but I also, and we'll talk about this later. But home life was hard, was tough, and because that affects my journey too. But to answer your question, I interned at Coca-Cola World Headquarters in Atlanta.
Really?
Between my 2 years at grad school, and writing, I was actuarial undergrad.
Wow, really?
And
Okay.
so I was a kind of an analytic brain, and I wrote mathematical programming for Coca-Cola on,
Wow.
and I modeled their entire advertising budget worldwide to see if it was optimized. So that's the kind of work I started, and I thought that's what I would go do. I took an internship with IBM, and in one of their offices there, and did some work for them, kind of while I was going to grad school, and I accepted a job. I got an offer from Arthur Andersen to join one of the big 8 accounting firms out of grad school, and I proudly went in, told the IBM office, "Hey, I got an offer. I think I'm going to go to Phoenix," and they said, "Well, you didn't even give us a chance. Let's talk." And so 2 days later, I'm interviewing, and I'm at a branch, and I accept a job with IBM at a branch office in Atlanta,
Wow.
out of grad school. So and I said, "Hey, it would really be good to get a couple years of IT experience before going getting a real job." And
Wow.
40 years later, here I am. So
That is
yeah,
amazing. So really, I mean, the path is really navigated. So you said you're the youngest child, is that right? Of five?
yeah.
Yeah, so that's amazing though. So you left home and you kind of ventured out on your own through schooling and then ended up, through internships at IBM. That's unbelievable. So like IBM is like the mecca of what we talk about all the time, from like leadership and learning and that type of thing.
Yeah.
I mean, from your experience, why didn't you leave, right? Like if you knew like the actuary and other things, like what kept you at that organization? What impressed you
Well,
so
yes.
much?
Well, I left twice. So,
Oh yeah,
but yeah, right. So, yeah, you know what? It was a different time. So 40 years ago, before I just finished 6 years of college, and before I could go see a customer, I had another year of training,
Mm,
IT training, sales training,
training. Okay.
systems training. I mean, it's just we don't see that today. Is IBM just poured into that? The
Hmm.
other thing is they cared a lot about family,
Okay.
and they did a lot of things around families. They poured into families. They poured into they worked hard, played hard, kind of stuff. But
Mm,
you worked really
okay.
hard. But I mean, 2 weeks of CEO training, at
Wow.
Harvard, 2 weeks of CFO training, view of a CFO and business simulations. And so, the amount of training IBM poured into me, uh, and then the challenges and the exposure to big business that
Yeah.
just kept my cup pretty full.
Wow.
Um, and we had a chance to move back to Nebraska, and took it, and I had a territory here, and then moved up, got my first line manager job in Iowa, and then a year later, so you start we used to say IBM stood for I've been moved. And so we moved, they moved me, you had to go through this. They had a pretty
Mm,
rigid, if you were on the ladder, you
okay.
moved every couple years. And
Okay.
when our kids were young, we decided not to, and
Okay.
stayed in Nebraska. Once I said I wasn't going to move, then my opportunities changed.
Mm,
And a group of us created this reseller.
okay.
I joined a couple guys in a reseller. We grew that in 5 years to about 180 million, 140
Wow.
million under my watch,
Wow.
and
Congratulations.
then it sold to a private equity backed company.
Okay.
And IBM said, "Hey, would you come back into the channel organization and show others how to grow like you did?"
Ah.
So I got introduced into the M&A world, because for a lot of IBM's resellers that weren't carrying IBM, that was the way to get into that, was to buy an IBM reseller. So I
I
ended up
see.
doing a lot of matchmaking and kind of got familiar with the M&A world, and then being in the middle of Nebraska, where nobody else wants to live, which is why I love it out here. Uh, I got IBM would say, "Hey, this big account or this opportunity it needs help. Gents, would you come do it?" So I got exposed to all parts of the IBM business. I became
Wow.
the senior location manager at IBM in my second round. And each time after about 12 and a half years, I'd get a little, the just the weight of that organization, uh,
Mm,
and the bureaucracy, whatever you want to call it. I mean, and other opportunities would start to, the entrepreneurial spirit, the opportunities would come, and so I chose to leave again, and
okay.
joined a little staffing firm. I like to say, promoted twice, fired once in 6 months. So I got my lessons there, on asking better questions as you interview, and
Mm,
uh, and I really got my exposure into EQ and the impact that leaders that what we do as leaders is really impacted by where we came from.
right.
And
Exactly.
and I'm not going to share the story of the leader I worked for, but it wasn't, what I didn't realize, I was the 11th person,
Oh
11th
wow.
man that she had put in that role and fired.
Oh wow.
And so you become pretty reflective on, wow. So, after that, I got an opportunity to kind of turn around an MSP for a family office that acquired it.
Wow.
And that's really my entry into the managed services business for the first time, just 8
Okay.
years ago, or 9 years
Wow.
ago now. And so I had to learn small business and kind of what it takes to run that, which has been a delightful challenge. Did that. We got it turned around, handed it back to the family, and ended up with a
Wow.
software company, and that got acquired by a PE-backed software company. And that's where
Okay.
I am today at a company called ConnectWise, which provides software to managed service providers to help them run their businesses. But so yeah, it's been it's uh, a, a ragged journey
Yeah.
sometimes, but and yeah, but it's been a good one. So that's kind of my
Yeah.
story
Yeah, that's
from a
amazing. I
business
love that.
standpoint. Yeah.
And it's interesting to hear kind of it seems like kind of the lesson from your story too is kind of seize the opportunity, right? Like I
Mhm.
guess a lot of people sometimes are afraid to kind of lean into that and seize the opportunity, but in those circumstances you did, and then you improved them
Yeah.
and made that better, which opened other doors to you, you
Yeah.
know.
I always taught my teams that worked for me, I always said, hey, you always got three choices. You can quit, bitch, or change.
I like
And
that.
no matter where you are, that's all the choices you have. And
Yeah,
so you can either leave if you don't like it, or then you have the option to complain about it,
right.
which is going to ruin your career. And so you really have either leave or change, and the change can
Yeah,
be if you're in a position of authority and can make changes to the business, great. If you're not, you're going to have to accept the change.
right.
And so at some point you kind of go, hey, I've got really two valid choices, which is, am I going to, can I thrive here, or do I have to leave?
Mhm.
And so, I think that's a valid opportunity, valid
Mhm.
question that I ask, everybody that worked for me, which is when they were unhappy with the company or unhappy, which is,
Right,
hey, be part of the change, or find something to go,
right.
that you can go throw yourself into.
Yeah, I like it. I love it. It's amazing though to hear kind of IBM from a leadership standpoint and how they immediately put you into situations to learn. And I think
Mhm.
that's really impactful to the listeners that are listening to today that might be in a small business. Many times people look at that as an expense for their employees, right? But it seems like
Yeah.
it provides a lot of value to teach people, right? Inherently, we don't know all these things until we're exposed to them. And that's pretty impressive in their part to start right off with. It
Yeah.
sounds like they were teaching you, how to talk and communicate to the CEO, how to do the same with the CFO, and how to understand the business aspect of it. And I
It
think
was
that's
really
really
It was
crucial.
really driven, technical
Yeah,
foundation, technology foundation, but you had to speak the language of business.
right.
You had to, I really became a consultant within IBM on strategic
Mm,
planning and on corporate finance,
right.
which, by the way, which created the opportunity, which unknowingly created me the opportunities to become a corporate
Mm,
executive. I mean, as executive, because I was
right.
prepared, right? So that's not why they trained me, but it's so that I could speak with execs. So yeah, it was. And I'll tell you what, the training was extraordinary.
Unbelievable.
Their leadership training was exceptional, and there's been a lot written about it. Uh, but what they learned is leadership really couldn't be taught, as a science. They had to put
Mm,
people into situations, and what you and I might call EQ today.
right.
You had to learn yourself, right?
Mm,
You had to learn yourself and your own flaws and your own, you had to struggle with risk, and you had to struggle with trade-offs,
right.
that
Yeah,
aren't
you had to
black
be
and
put
white.
into the situation to see if you could overcome it or not, the
Yeah.
adversity
So
of it.
yeah, and
Yeah,
and so you did a lot of case studies and a lot of situational things and games and other things that made you really, really uncomfortable. Yeah, and guess what? It's all the stuff that leaders find themselves in.
right.
You got 30 seconds left in the game. It's fourth down, and you've got 40 yards to go.
Right. Yeah, I mean,
And some
this is a people
quarterbacks thrive in
business.
that environment and some don't, right?
That's
And it's
right.
just, it's you've got to, there's a leadership aspect that has to come through beyond, the fundamentals. Yeah.
Fun. I love it. That's well said. And I think we talk kind of about leadership kind of in another way. Your intro, the way that you speak is very much about like serving others, right? Like
Mhm.
how you are coaching your team and talking them through situations and your attitude about it. Like, and also you talk kind of about a faith background and whatnot. Like, what do you define kind of like servant leadership to be? Like, what do
Yeah,
you
it's a
think
great,
for you is that?
yeah, it's a great question because, uh, when servant leadership, the language and that term kind of came about, you know, uh, in the late 1970s, 80s, somewhere in there. I was a young guy, but coming through college, it was just starting to talk about. I think academia has probably messed that one up a little bit because
Mm,
they're trying to define it,
right,
and they're trying to decide if it's effective relative to
right.
other leadership styles.
Yeah.
And the answer is, yeah, sometimes. I mean, I mean, but so to me, your question is a great question, which is how do I define it? Because I think it is pretty vague otherwise, which is, and it really is the service, it kind of comes from, developing people,
Mm,
building trust in a team, which would
yeah.
be consistent with, you think of, dysfunctions of a team, and,
Right.
the foundation is trust,
Right.
uh, and results. But it's kind of if you contrast that with maybe a historical hierarchical uh, model, an autocratic model of
Hmm.
management,
Right.
servant leadership says, hey, you've got to know and care about the people. So EQ creeps into that conversation, which
Hmm.
is, kind of the emotional intelligence, and again, I think that starts with knowing ourselves,
Hmm.
and which is facing our own demons, facing our own
Hmm.
strengths and weaknesses, which that means leads you back into your history,
Right. Right.
into your own life, and sometimes that's messy.
Mm,
For me, that was, growing up in a abusive alcoholic home,
mm,
which created a very driven
mm,
kid with a
right.
high intuition because I never knew which dad was walking in
Mm,
the house. And so I didn't face that stuff till I was 45. So I'm a
wow.
different leader today than
Than you
then.
were back then.
And, so I had to do my own recovery through that as that just heightened my awareness,
Yeah.
and that these are people that are in our businesses.
Hmm.
They bring you and I've talked about this before. They bring their stuff with them to work.
Right.
Uh, we want results. Uh, we have to have results in order to continue to provide for them and their families and our
Right.
families. And, it doesn't have to be selfish motivation. Uh, nothing against good earnings, right? I mean,
Right.
I'm a fan of good earnings.
Yeah.
So, but because it allows so much more in
Right.
reinvestment and in our people and our businesses and our communities and all that. So, uh, so from a servant, I think it's just a really high, listening, delegating.
Mm,
And I think the thing I had to really learn that I was hard is, uh, I could give people altitude sickness.
mm,
Because I could see where I wanted to go. And
that's a
I
good
knew that,
word.
if I could just describe the top of the mountain so well that they'd all want to come with me. And
Yeah, you're really
and
selling the
what,
vision.
yeah, and I could sell the vision. And the challenge is, the example I would use is, a young single mom who's struggling to make bills and is
Mm,
glad to have a job, needs to be home to pick up kids and all that.
mm,
She just wants to know and I say that's an example, but it's like, hey, I just want to know what you want me to do today.
right. Yeah. Just
I
tell me
don't I
what
want
to
you to
do,
go to the
boss.
top of the mountain with me. And they're like, and you're giving me altitude sickness, right? I mean,
Yeah.
and that comes from a book at Gallup, and I'm a kind of fan of their Q12 model of
Mm,
employee engagement, because it's kind of
right.
starts at the base, which is, do I know my job? And then how do I connect that?
Mm,
Listen, you don't go to the top of the mountain on the first day. You set up base camp,
right.
you go up to first camp, you make maybe multiple trips to carry stuff up there, you acclimate, You go to second level. This is a long process of climbing a mountain.
Right.
And I just wanted to go there, right? And
I know that
so,
feeling.
I had to learn to, hey,
Mm.
you almost got to become a Sherpa and not
Right.
you're going to have to go up and down multiple times and find your way and get all the equipment and all the people. You got to get the people in the right places, the right people in the right seats, all the things we talk about as managers and as leaders, so I think that when I say servant leadership, which is, have we equipped our people to be successful?
Mm.
Do we see them as human beings that
Right.
have their, that this is one part of their life that we have to bring together this, this motley crew of people, this, this misfit toy, the group of misfit toys, and do something really cool with it. Right. And I think we can.
That's well said, because that goes along. I think you were mentioning like 5 dysfunctions about Lensoni's principles, and I think it's really imperative. Like you talk about trust, right? Like an inherent trust is required before you can actually implement that vision. And I think you're kind of really solidifying that. I think it's amazing, to hear about it that way. But we kind of talk sometimes like, is there an interpreter to the vision? Person that has the vision, and that was a lesson learned for myself. 10 years ago, realizing, man, they follow, but they have no idea. They can't see a week out, 2 weeks out. And I'm trying to talk about 5 years later, and you really needed that interpreter to really be like, how does that relate to today, the quarter, right? Like the 90-day
I
stint.
think you're a great example of where, using a system like EOS,
Right.
And having an integrator,
Yeah.
who, you recognize that maybe the person who can execute and drive
Right.
accountability and drive a cadence and a regular conversation towards that goal, towards the
Right.
vision, maybe a separate person than a visionary,
That's right.
because they have different skills, they have different capabilities, they have different focus. And you do need that. You do need to, like you said, you need to say, hey, what do I need to do in the next week or the next
Right.
quarter, knowing that it's connected to some bigger
To that bigger picture. You talk a little bit about kind of your journey, like what would you say, like as a leader from all of these years and the success that you had, like was there core values or core principles that you kind of led with, that you could share with the group? Like did any of that inherently, you talk about kind of we're built from where we were with our family. So it sounds like there's some core values that you had, some bumps in that road, but like, is there any that you live by today that you're willing to share?
Yeah, that's a great question, Nick. Let me say, for the first many years, uh, it's probably driven by fear, and
Oh, okay.
fear and hard work, and fear of failure and hard work, and
Okay.
some belief that at some level of success and income, the world would get better and
I
easier.
see. I see.
And that's probably true the statistics would say up to $75,000. That's probably true,
True.
right?
Yeah.
There is some happiness connected to income. So today it's really, first of all, the hard work and the is still a base, willing to do anything that you would ask somebody else to do.
Okay.
I mean,
Okay.
now clearly there's some technical things I can't do, but if we needed to pull cable, I'd go pull cable. I mean,
Okay.
if you're going to do layoffs, that is, you don't delegate that. You go do them yourself, because it ought to hurt, because it does hurt, and it ought to hurt, right? You should feel that. So one is, kind of do unto others, right? Do as you would have them do.
I
Well,
like
how would
that.
you want to be treated? And then it really comes down to then becoming more intentional. So as a core value, which is, they can move, what I want can move. Do I want to finish the race well at this point? Because I'm near the end of my business career, right? It's easy to say, God, family, and then work.
Right.
But boy, oh boy, that was just
That's
never
hard.
the way I did it. That was just never, I mean, if you ask for the report card on how I did on that, would be pretty upside down. So I'm and what I've learned is that I, kind of my second or third time through a career in different ways, really, really, if you can just do it with really, really high character,
Mm.
it kind of works out.
Right.
You don't have to try to be so self-serving. You don't have to do, uh, you don't have to hurt anyone else to do well for yourself.
That's right.
And
Yeah.
not that I did, but it was just like, I saw it a lot,
Mm.
and especially in big corporations, what we would call politics or whatever,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
you know, so I think it starts with, hey, know thyself.
Mm.
It's the Go Giver book.
I
Hey,
love it.
your value, we measure stuff wrong.
Right.
And I measured it wrong for a long time. And so, kind of take care of the ones you love and the things you love and be intentional about that. The rest of it will take care of itself. Doesn't mean you can't be successful. Doesn't mean you can't make a
Right.
lot of money, any of that. But just, get those things, make the major on the majors, minor on the minors. But that means you got to write down what your majors are and what your minors
Right.
are for you.
Right. Right.
For you. I mean, I've got a handful of things that, you know, uh, love God with all your heart, mind, soul, and strength. And I say
Mm.
spiritual, mental,
Love it.
physical, and emotional. Am I taking care of my health? Am I taking care of those things?
Mm.
I've got, and I kind of know when that four-legged stool's kind of out of whack.
Yeah.
Right now I'm a little, I've gotten heavier. And by the way, as I age, that changes, right? The
Right.
attention I have to give to physical
It's
is
so
different.
different. Yeah.
And I'm not doing it yet. And I
Mm.
know I need to, but so listen, there's always more to work on, but I think you got to look at, hey, what is it? Hey, well done at the end, right? What does well
Right.
done look like? And for each of us, that may be a little different, but
That's right.
as a believer, it's a, hey, can I,
Mm.
I'm going to be held to account, and how, and not all good, but do I, am I really, and I think God cares a lot more about who we become and our character
Right.
than he does about what we become.
That's right. Yeah. I mean,
And
he
he
knows
could
we're
just care
imperfect
less
people.
about this. He doesn't care. He can use it,
That's
but he
right.
doesn't really care about my success. He cares about
Yeah.
me. Yeah, and as
Yeah.
a human, right? So I think we can pass that on back to your servant leader
Mm.
conversation.
I think that's really important too, right? Like a lot of the times, the people that sometimes we're coaching or talking to actually don't have that goal, or they don't have that next step that really centers them, which sometimes is scary for them, right? Like they don't
Mhm.
believe that there is kind of a higher power or a higher
Right.
goal, and which really makes them kind of stifle. And I really appreciate you kind of leaning into that.
Yeah.
For me personally as well, like. I realize, although I'm younger, as you start to look back, even in the small 20 years or 25 years, you're like, is really all of this worth it if ultimately I'm going somewhere else? And if
Mhm.
everything that I'm doing is it intentional to the long-term goal?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
man, that is a constant roller coaster, right? Like I
It
was
is.
taught, take care of everyone else, then work on yourself. And that is really difficult to change because you never get to that part, or I
Yeah.
never get to that part. So being intentional to change that, to be like,
Yeah.
wow, the next segment of my life, I want to be around and have 6 grandchildren. And if I don't start changing it now, you're not going to be there. And I think you talk of that about like leadership too. Like we all develop skills when we're younger and then adjust it and we keep improving. And I think we talk about this word failure all the time and we treat it like it's a negative thing, when in
Yeah.
reality it's, if we're willing to fail quickly and learn from it, it only improves us. It just makes us better human
Mhm.
beings, and to your point, to help others. And
Yeah.
so I
Well, and,
think
and I,
your
and I can
content is
respect, I've learned to respect, uh, I grew up, central Nebraska, right? It's not a diverse population. It's pretty, it's pretty, it's, so there's not a lot of diversity, and,
yeah.
very conservative. And so, gosh, you have a lot of things to overcome and to
Yeah.
understand when you when you move into the rest, into a broader environment and domain, and so I think our character matters, and I think what we have to do is just continue to build our respect for others that different. I mean, so I was a church kind of Christian, but I don't know that I was a great Jesus follower, because we just, I went to church every Sunday and did all that. But I don't know that I really understood that. I mean, I think I just, you did it, and it was not all bad, and it prepared me well, but it was, but how do you reconcile that with with an abusive home, right? And I mean, it's just like, when you look back, you're gonna have to deal with that at some point, because it affects you. We can be that model at work, right? Back to servant leader. I mean, Jesus was not what they expected.
Right.
They were looking for a war hero, a conqueror.
That's right.
And that's not what they got, right?
That's right.
And I think that's, some people, share their views pretty blatantly with us, kind of expecting us to fight, and
right.
And if we can meet them where they are.
Yep.
A lot of times what I found is they'll go to work for you. I mean, that's
right.
Hey, that that gal respects me.
Right.
They allow me to be myself.
They care.
They care. I mean, it's the virtues that Jesus would teach, right? We're like,
it's amazing, right?
Yeah, he didn't. He didn't. He didn't.
And he was who he was.
Abuse people. Yeah. Like nobody sense. I mean, it was right. And so I think in that regard, we have a lot we can learn, and we're on that journey, and we're on that journey together, all of us, and it's kind of messy, and we don't do it well always, but I think, like I said, I think he cares about our character, and that's a long. And I think he says what we basically we'll. You're going to stay on this journey until I return, and I'm like, oh, I guess I'm going to stay on this journey forever, right? Yeah. And I'm going to send you a counselor, and I'm like, we must need one, right? So I think we have to be open to that, to counsel, and to. Absolutely. And by the way, that's kind of the men's ministry thing, right? Is we've got to have people. We've got to have people with objective eyes on us that will tell us the truth. Yeah. And because often we can't see it ourselves.
That's right. I love that. And so many things that you're talking about in regards to that and the belief system actually applies to what we do every day, right? From like what you were explaining, right? From a faithful perspective, the Lord says, hey, if you don't actually learn or lean into me or have a conversation, you'll never know, right? Like, I'm here, but I'm not, if you don't know me, how can we get acquainted? And it's kind of like in business, right? If you don't know your people and you don't, lean into that, how are you to be able to follow someone or something? And today's reflection that I reflected on was about the sheep, right? And that the sheep only follow one master regardless. And that, oh wow, that hits home, right? Like, they follow a leader that's strong and knows that's going to take care of them. And so it's kind of like, man, maybe we found the next leadership manual is the Bible, right? Like, we could wow, so many things.
Imagine that. Right.
Can you imagine that? That's right.
Yeah. It just isn't, it's still so anti-establishment. Right. I mean, it's still so anti we just, and that, we all struggle with this desire for more authority, for more, hey, just do what I say. Right. I mean, a lot of leading is just like parenting. Right. And what I call the velvet hammer, right? You got to kind of be soft, but hit hard, you gotta, hey, be hard, what a good, old adage is, right? Hey, hard on the sin, easy on the sinner. I mean, whatever, but it's really is about the people and going, hey, Nick, I like you, but what you did was wrong.
Right. Yeah.
That's so much healthier.
I don't
appreciate so much. Yeah, it's right. Who we are and what we do can be very different.
Right.
And so, boy, I think that's just a maturing that we all have to go through to kind of to be okay
Yeah.
with ourselves first, but
That's
then,
right. You're
and being able to
absolutely right.
laugh and being able to see ourselves for the
Yeah.
truth, which means we may need other eyes on us, but also offer that same freedom for our teams.
Team, yeah. And they kind of go back to a faithful man too. Patrick Lencioni is a good faithful man, but he says about you're talking about like, you need to be humble and you need to
Mm.
be hungry. You gotta have to have a drive towards something, right?
Mhm.
And smart's not necessarily intelligence. It's about like that EQ you're talking about. Like, do you understand and can view other people? And it's just amazing, to kind of take all these things and really realize it's a journey. What I learned
Mhm.
yesterday and applied, I can learn to be better even
Yeah,
more each and every day. And that
yeah,
kind of goes along with one of the things in your intro. You're like 50 high-end IT A personality leaders. So you go from selling, being with IBM, and now you got this motley crew of people. Like, how do you take what you learn and deal with all kinds of mix of A personalities? Like, how do you
yeah.
do that every day?
You know what? It nothing fills my cup more than that. It's
Mm,
just it feeds me for the rest of the year. I do, I
wow.
get to go with that's it. Those 50 CEOs are in 4 different groups. We meet for a couple days each quarter. You're one of those, right?
Yep.
That's how you and I met. Uh, it is service. You got to, I if you look at my strengths, and I'm a fan of Strengths Finder, and that
Yeah.
you pick your favorite assessment tools, but DISC and PI and Myers-Briggs and all that. And by the way, I've been through them all and I like them. And they all shine some light, uh, but some of the but if you get under me, it's really uh, I can see individuals. I do like serving. I do like and facilitating. The
Mm.
reason I love photography, I've learned, is really because I love the act of seeing and
Ah,
and
okay.
seeing that and capturing that. And so, when those the nice thing about the groups that we're a part of is that they have common uh, objective,
Yeah.
right? And they have a common objective. So if you keep focusing on the common objective and you're there to help them find that,
Right.
and you put
Right.
10 to 15 really smart people in a room together, there's really not much for me to do except to create an environment for them to
Mm,
share, uh,
mm,
to make sure all voices are heard
mm,
as best as we can, uh, to give time and space and margin for
mm,
that, and not feel responsible for filling in the gaps. Let some quiet
mm,
happen where people, so it can get uncomfortable,
mm.
and make it a safe place. And I mean,
Yeah.
guess what? I mean, these are the principles that go anywhere. But I think that's for me. I walk away from there with so much more than I give,
Yeah.
and I walk away each time completely exhausted
Right. Okay. Okay.
and my cup
Yeah.
full. I mean, I mean, if I hit an airplane, I'm out and drooling like
Conked
within
out.
minutes, right? I am. I'm just like, I mean, I am spent
Yeah.
because what that takes is going back. I mean, some of the things you learn as a
Mm,
kid, right? For me, was that intuition of what dad's walking in.
right.
That intuition works out pretty well right now because now I can look at this room and go,
Ah.
hey, this person, she's uncomfortable right now.
Mm,
She's engaged. She's not. Okay, what can I do with that? So my job is
mm,
really to facilitate an environment for them to share because and then if I have experience that I can add, great. But if not,
right.
uh, they all want to improve. They all care about one another.
Mm,
If you get rid of all that,
mm.
and if everybody knows they're there for the same purpose and they want to help one another, they can be, as you know, there can be some incredible bonds.
Hear it. And I hear you like kind of like talk through the journey, right? Like we start young, we get educated, we go in and we want to conquer the world. and
Yeah.
we're conquering the world, and then you're like, man, we have to readjust. And now you're kind of at the latter part, and you're like, man, how do I express and give that back? Which is
Yeah.
amazing, right? Like, what a humbling experience, but I don't know how you do it. Meaning, like, with all the intelligence and all the knowledge you have to be able to sit and listen and not give like a fix, right?
Mm.
It takes probably extreme restraint. But so kudos to you, because that is a skill that I have yet to master, with still kind of being in that driving force and learning, kind of to give that air, right? I
Yeah.
oversee right now a really high introvert. I'm an extrovert. And so learning to pause with dead
Oh,
air
count
is
to 5,
like,
count to
is
10.
like,
Ah.
oh, and I realized, wow, Nick, you talk too much. Like, question to statement ratio, lead different. And I stopped talking, and it was dead air. And I am like melting down inside, and
Oh.
all the goodness comes out, right?
Mhm.
Like you, what a
Yeah.
talent to be able to
Yeah.
switch from that high intensity to being able to listen. So kudos to
Yeah.
you. Yeah.
Well, no, thank you very much. But I think the other thing you realize after a lot of years is how little you know.
Mm,
And it's just it's fun to be around smart people and
mm.
driven people and people who want to attain and do the right things and learn, that hey, are willing to, hey, I'm going to stick my neck out and do my own podcast. And I mean
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
fascinating for me to be part of that. And
Yeah.
so, if you if you embrace that,
Yeah.
kind of, hey, I'm learning and and if I can just if I do nothing more than, what do they say? What the old adage, right? People don't care how much you know till they know how much you care.
Yeah. Yeah.
Until if I can just go in there and care,
Mm.
right? A lot of my mistakes will get forgiven.
Yeah.
I mean, when I speak over somebody, when I was like, if I had waited 10 more seconds, I think the gold would, we all do that. And so you go, hey,
Yeah.
and so it takes a lot of grace. Um,
Yeah.
and we learn to give more grace. We learn to give ourselves more grace.
Yeah.
And maybe that comes with all the gray hair. I don't know.
I don't know. I tell you, like, the principles of leading too that you go over is very much based around that, right? Like,
Mhm.
like leading, and we hear over and over again in this podcast, for the people that have developed to be successful like yourself, is that they're constantly learning. It does not matter where they're at in their
Mhm.
age or whatnot. They're constantly curious. And that's the
Mhm.
common
Yeah, it's a good
denominator,
one.
that there's curiosity. And so sometimes when people aren't curious, I'm like, "You're not curious?" They're like, "No, I'm okay." And like, how do you even embody? How do you go home and not be curious about like something, right?
Yeah, they're
Um,
probably curious about something, just not the things not the things that would help us, right? So
yeah,
yeah, but you're right. I mean, and you're right. I think that's a great word, and then some kind of uneasiness that just says I can't be curious and then not at least and not explore it.
check into it, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. And that might kind of go back to kind of the values that you have, even consider even in the face side of things, right? I feel that journey's every day, and I'll never know enough, and I'm not meant to know
Mm.
everything, but that curiosity to continue to kind of hear it
Mm.
over again and learn something new is kind of like,
Yeah.
I think, the same principle in business.
Yeah. Yeah. I
You
think that
know,
is the faith journey. I do. I agree
yeah.
with you.
And so, as we start to kind of go through kind of the chapters of this, like what is like a misnomer? Like, people that are, we hear this all the time, that are like, well, I want to be a leader because I've been working so long, so many years. I think it just means I should be a leader or a manager. And I think earlier in a side
Mhm.
conversation we were having, you had a very big distinction between leading and managing. And
Yeah.
could you share a little bit of that? Like,
Yeah.
for people that want to think that they are wanting to move into that journey?
Yeah. It's great. Yeah, it's one of my, one of the things I care most about is kind of that distinction between management and leadership. IBM was great at training management
Mm,
or new manager, right? Which is you know, the art of performance development of our people. It's all meant well, and you have to do it
hmm
for the organizational. right? You have to, and I take groups through exercise that says, hey, give me the words associated with management, give me the words associated with leadership. And you start to go, oh, okay, so yeah, because management may be control, it may be budgets, it may be performance plans and development plans and performance appraisals and all the
tools,
all the tools and running the business, right?
Yeah.
And MBAs learn that. I mean, they learn all that, and finance, and they learn that. And one of the things that business has done now is we've renamed second and third and fourth line managers into lead. We've called them leadership. We have executive leadership teams and I think that's confused it because when you talk about
they're really management teams, right? I mean, the operational people day to day is a management team.
And by the way, some of them are excellent leaders,
right?
And some of them are absolutely not. They're excellent. They may be very effective managers. They get stuff done.
Yep.
But they're brutal on the people. I mean, there's a guy that I worked for that I said I wouldn't follow him into a steakhouse.
Wow.
I mean, because to be a leader, you got to have followers, right? I mean, by definition,
right?
You can name somebody as a manager, but you can't name them as a leader. You can't, that's not a position. And this is Bob Gentzler's opinion. So to me, that whole leadership thing is going back to what we talked about is, are you trustworthy? Do you have a high enough character? Do you build trust in a team? Do you care about the people? Do you care about the people in balance with the results?
Right, with the accountability,
Jesus was a great guy at tough love, right? I mean, he didn't. Hey, now go and do that no more, right? I mean, stop.
That's right.
Right. So there's nothing wrong with accountability, and are you willing to listen to other opinions? Are you willing to delegate? Are you willing to be inefficient enough to connect people to the vision?
That's right.
And to the mission without just,
that's right.
Hey, memorize these 5 core values. Well,
yeah.
I mean, I don't know. Is that really
lead with fear?
Yeah, right. And so, you know what I mean? So, yeah. And so, and by the way, there's effective leaders who do lead with fear, right? I mean, you look at our politics. I mean, you look at the different styles of leadership today, and you couldn't be bigger contrasts, right?
That's right.
And you don't have to have high character to be a leader,
right?
But I think in the long run, in the business world, that'd be the strive. What we strive for is that. And so I would say I separate leadership and management. They're both important. By the way, you can lead from the first line, from the ground level of an organization. You know it. Yeah. There are people in our organizations that people look to. That have no title.
That's right.
But they're going, man, when I need this, that's who I go to.
Who do you go to?
And then if you start to say, then you need to start asking yourself, well, why do they go to that person? And if you ask that question, well, what makes that person attractive? What you're going to start to find is leadership traits. Hey, they're an expert. They're humble. Like you said, they work hard. They just they don't demand a lot of attention.
We call it GSD, get shit done.
Right. They do. They get stuff done. And so, and then, then over time, I think, that leadership at the top, if you don't have that EQ, that self-awareness, then you get to then you get some guys, and some gals, but it tends to be in our industry, way too many white guys, which is a different conversation, is, you get to there and you really find people, what we used to call the Peter principle, right? People move up to their level of incompetency, is because we don't look at those other softer skills.
That's right.
And the ability to develop and grow and accept, risk and deal with, uncertainty and all that. And so, and kind of, Crucial Conversations and some of those kind of books, they all exist because we struggle with those things.
That's right.
I struggle with conflict because I grew up in a house full of conflict, and so I was good at avoiding it. So I have to be aware of that as a leader today, because I do not, that my first action is not confront.
Really? Okay.
Yeah. So I have to know that about me, because it was a limiting factor.
It's like to
right?
mediate. Yeah.
Yeah. I had to kind of go, if I get really uncomfortable about this conversation, I probably need to go have it. Because every little piece of me is going, avoid it. And I'm like, not as a leader, I'm going to have to. So I'm going to have to develop that.
Yeah. We call that the 24-hour principle. If it's still bothering you 24 hours, go confront it. We did to kind of hearing you, you're kind of saying, like, you have to, from a leading and managing is completely different. And there might be a lot of great managers, but the leading is kind of the growth, the vision, the understanding of the organization, to be able to then be able to sell that vision to those individual people and develop them. And I see a lot of people that are want to kind of lead and manage forget that now it's not about them. What you talk about a lot today, it's about the people you lead. And it's a really hard transfer for that sometimes. Some love that, but others are like, well, I still want the value of the success, but it comes from the people they lead.
And I think that's a little bit of the flaw of labeling people leaders, like executive leaders team, executive leadership team, is they may have gotten to that level and earned it by being such an effective manager.
Right.
The reason we call them leadership positions is because we need them to lead.
That's right.
But that's aspirational.
That's right.
And the conflict comes when you put somebody who, you put there who's very competent and capable,
right,
but don't have the ability to lead. And so then you end up with this organization,
stale.
As said, from from Animal House, right? It's Niedermeyer, right? It's who could command,
right,
but was killed by his own troops, right? I mean, ultimately, right? I mean, that's just, that's it's like your troops. I mean, it's can you ever rely on them rather than yourself?
That's right.
And a lot of the challenge is, a lot of entrepreneurs, a lot of us, have incredible capacity,
and they can't let go of the vine, though.
Yeah. Right. They have incredible capacity, and our teams and all the individuals on our teams won't have that same kind of capacity.
That's right.
And we expect them to all be little us's, and they're not. And as soon as you learn to assemble, a motley crew, a group of misfit toys, a group of, all that together, man, I think what you can build is pretty incredible.
It's amazing. I appreciate that. So as we kind of wind down here today, I want to talk about the grandchildren. So you have your grandchildren, your motley crew, right? And so as they develop, like what are the three things that you want to instill in them, and all this knowledge and love and caring and experiences that you've had? Like, what are the three things that you hope to instill in them?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think, you hope that they can avoid some of the traps, right? So one is, I really want them to follow their heart, which means we need to create a safe place for them to be themselves, and to grow up with confidence that they're okay. And they're loved, and that they know, even when bad happens, and when I mess up, when I do those things, that this is the safest place, right? This is, can we be Jesus to them? Can we be so safe that they're willing to be themselves and take risks and fail without feeling like that's and learn that as a lesson. So I think that's the number one. And the two is, I want them to know that food doesn't come from the store. I think we've lost a lot of the connection back to, where, that, and so that kind of includes, hey, that water, all the things we've taken for granted,
Mm,
we just can't. So we've got
right.
to we've got to be a good steward. That's those things. I'm mixing a couple of them together now, but I think that is, hey, you need to know that. Did you realize that those cows were driving by? Real is that
Right.
hamburger you ate tonight?
Right.
That, that water, that's in the river,
Isn't
it's in the
endless.
aquifer that isn't endless, that, that water is protected because we drink it. It's
Right.
not, it isn't, water doesn't come from a bottle.
Mm,
And food doesn't come from a can, and food doesn't come from a restaurant.
right.
So I want to, I guess, and so lastly, I would say, and this kind of goes back to photography, which is, is really to start to slow down.
Mm,
I was never comfortable until the last 10 years or so with solitude
mm,
and with quiet, because it's so disruptive and it's so
mm,
exposing to what we look to for medication, what we look to for
mm,
distraction, so we don't have to
mhm,
face the stuff that troubles us.
mhm.
And so, to give them permission to slow down. I mean, think how busy our kids are.
Right.
Even compared to us as me as a boy. I mean, life revolved around mom and dad, not around my sports.
Right. Right.
And um, so those are some of the things. I mean,
I
without a
love it.
Chris Bliss, those are some of the things that
Yeah.
are kind of on my mind with the little ones.
I appreciate you sharing that. It's very helpful to kind of understand and learn from that too. I think from your perspective too, from kind of the faithful aspect of things too. You were talking about like the food, right? And we can kind of relate that to the food
Mhm.
of how God provides us kind of the value. But one thing that I've learned that seems kind of really terrible, like why haven't you learned it before, is that word retreat. Like what
Mhm.
does the definition of retreat mean? And it truly means to
Mhm.
kind of to remove yourself. And only out of being a knucklehead sometimes, God says, like, I'm talking to you all the time, but you can never hear me. And it's amazing, like, to even wake up and just sit in silence for 10, 15 minutes. And what you hear, and you had said kind of the medicines and all this kind of stuff, like it kind of it recenters you to realize
Mhm.
that you might be getting direction and you're just not listening
Yeah.
to it,
Oh, yeah. And if you don't believe he speaks, you'll never hear him.
That's right, true
By the
that.
way, and I grew up, in a in a Lutheran church, and that wasn't even something we talked about.
Right.
And never thought about the Bible as a book of examples rather than a book of exceptions. It's like,
Directions, yeah.
and he still speaks. So
Right.
that means, boy, I'd never, so that was all brand new to me 15 years ago. That idea that he still speaks, and
Wow.
and that there's active evil in the world. It's not like Jesus took care of that. So
That's right.
I'm a little more all the time like Gandhi, which is, hey, I love you, Jesus, but I'm not a real fan of your church, of your Christianity, which is
Oh,
because, and it's because, I mean, I'm just what we, that's a conversation, but
yeah.
the church, churches can protect us from all. I mean, the life that we are that is offered to us through Jesus is just is a life of
Incredible.
freedom, right? That's
Yeah.
William Wallace's sword on my wall of a replica, and it's about passion, it's about freedom. There's so much freedom
Right.
available to us. It's not a book of rules, but a book of that says, "Here's how you get free."
Yeah,
And boy,
set
that's
you
it.
free.
And that's
Yeah.
it. And it's like, wow, That's not what I learned.
Right.
That's not what I learned, right?
Right.
So so that's been an unlearning in the process.
Mm,
You're right. It is a and he does speak, and it's like, really,
yeah.
and when you finally get some of that, and you go, wow, and how do I learn that, and how do I learn to find the quiet, that for the still
Yeah.
small voice and all those things, and in what ways does he speak?
Right.
Yeah, it's a pretty fascinating journey.
It is
That journey is
fascinating.
that's a different journey, a different conversation,
Different
but it's
conversation, but
fascinating.
what was interesting is somebody said, "Hey, I want you to be an angel" to their kid, and the kid then says back, "But mom, the devil was an angel too." And I'm like, ooh, okay, well,
Yeah,
I guess we have
yeah,
to reframe that.
yeah. Be careful, right?
Well, Bob, parting comments here, but from your perspective, people that are trying to go through this journey, you've been there, done that, you're continuing to live in it. Is there a book or a resource that you could share with them that's been impactful to you, that maybe
You,
they could check out?
you bet. So, what made me think of when and I'll get to a book in just a second. What you said is, on their journey, and I'm like, hey, one of the best things I learned is when you're going through hell, don't stop.
Oh, valid point.
Right. So that was one thing, you learned. So a couple of things. One is probably the book there's two books that probably have had more impact on me. One is Wild at Heart.
Ooh, okay.
John Eldredge wrote a book on Wild at Heart, which is really the journey of the freedom that's available to us through
Mm.
Christ. Probably has the most impact on me and invited me into looking at my old stuff that
Ah,
and
okay.
that was a men's ministry that I worked around for a long time. The other book, kind of more practical too, is Leadership and Self-Deception.
Ooh.
Uh, it's really a book about the filters we put on when we look at other people,
Ah,
and
okay.
not seeing them how as they are. That book probably has, and some others I've talked to, is really simple read, and really but pretty impactful. And then I guess lastly I'd say like now Discover Your Strengths, which
Ah,
is Gallup Strengths Finder, which is you know kind of what are our innate strengths that we can play to. Yeah, those books have all been good for me.
I appreciate that. Excellent job, Bob. Thank you. As we kind of come to a close, do you have any parting comments or feedback to the listeners?
I would just say, just the conversation we've had, Nick, this is delightful. I really appreciate the invitation. It's been interesting for me to be on this side of it. Uh, don't stop. I mean, I think that is it.
Mm.
It is a journey. Embrace it. Uh, I think whatever you would choose as your higher power, whatever you would see as your own higher power, uh, embrace that. And because because I think we have to be part of something bigger than
Mm.
ourselves.
Love it.
And otherwise the burden is just so you're going to have to share it. So one is don't walk alone. I guess you don't walk
Mm.
alone. You're
Right.
not alone. uh, what do they say? The best time to plant a tree is what, 20 years ago or today,
Yeah, very,
right? I mean,
very true.
and so there's nothing, no matter where you are, you're okay. You're okay. You move forward from here, embrace it today, and move forward, and then just keep, and I think you brought it up, is just don't let failure. We just, I mean, all this gray hair and this experience is really a bunch of the other side of failure, right?
Right.
And we could talk a lot about that, but it's really what you learn from it.
Mm, thank you, Bob. We appreciate you very much, and I appreciate you
Appreciate
very
you.
much. Thank you for leading us each quarter. And so, well, Bob, it's been a blast having you on the show today. With your decades of IT experience, your knack for photography, and your passion for servant leadership, you certainly kept us on our toes. From climbing the corporate ladder to capturing moments behind the lens, you've shown us that true leadership is about more than just managing. It's about inspiring and serving others. Thank you for bringing your unique blend of expertise and humor to the Servant Leadership Library. And keep snapping those photos and leading the way, Bob. Until next time, this is Nicholas Paluco signing off for Servant Leadership Library.